Good morning, seniors. Happy Thursday and also happy Friday because you don't have school tomorrow, April 24th. It's a PIR day for teachers, so you guys have a long weekend, so enjoy that. Hopefully by now, if you're keeping track with the reading calendar, you have finished Act 2 of Othello, so we're almost to the halfway point of this play. And Act 2 is where we really get to see Iago's personality a lot better. We see how conniving and manipulative he is. He is a very iconic Shakespearean villain. He's really known for his soliloquies, and that is when he kind of steps aside and talks to himself and also to the audience, and just sort of lets us all know what's going on. In his own mind, he tells us his plan, so we know kind of what he's getting at, but obviously the people in the play don't know what's going on. And that's kind of what Iago is known for. He's really good at kind of pretending that he has everyone's best interest in mind. He kind of plays the victim a lot. He also really helps, or pretends, I guess, to be on Cassio's side and Othello's side and tries to help them by giving them advice and feedback and stuff like that. And so they all trust him and think he's a good guy, when really, because of these soliloquies and because of these conversations within his own head, and with Rodrigo, we as the audience know that Iago is a really bad dude. We know what his plan is. We know that his desire is to kind of separate Cassio and Othello, and also to create a divide between Desdemona and Othello. So we know what he's getting at with that. So Iago is really a huge villain, and he really works by not doing anything himself, but by kind of getting Cassio and Othello and Desdemona to create problems amongst themselves just by kind of whispering in their ears. So if you think of the movie Aladdin, Iago is the name of the parrot, Jafar's parrot, who kind of acts in the same way, where he kind of whispers stuff in people's ears to get them to cause trouble amongst themselves. That's why he was given that name. In the Aladdin movie, it is after Iago within Othello. So that's just a little bit about him, and we see him revealed a lot in this specific act, Act 2. Shakespeare does a lot to demonstrate his characteristics and to kind of let us as the audience know what's happening, what's going to happen, let us know kind of how Iago is successful in his plan through the use of those soliloquies. So Act 2 opens up on the front lines. We have Montano. He is a big main soldier for the the Venetians, basically, and he is the one who's already on the front lines. He's keeping watch. We find out there's this huge storm coming in, and that it's like this monster storm that no one's seen anything like it before, and he's very doubtful that any ships could make it through this storm. So he's really of the belief that the Turks are probably going to have to surrender. They're going to lose a bunch of men. They're going to lose a bunch of their ships, and they're not going to be able to have this war anymore. So that's what he is suspicious of, and that's kind of what him and the other soldiers are talking about when Cassio arrives. And Cassio tells everyone that him and Othello were coming together, but their ships got separated. He doesn't know where Othello is. He's happy that he's safe, but he's worried about Othello. And with this storm, he doesn't really have high hopes about their arrival. Then they see a ship in the distance, and it shoots out a green shot, which would just be a signifier that they are not enemy. They're on the Venetian side. They're the good guys, basically. And so then everyone goes down to the docks and welcomes this ship, and we find out that it is Iago and Desdemona. So Desdemona has been entrusted to Iago. We find out he was the one who was supposed to escort her here to Cyprus, which also goes to show us that Othello really, really trusts Iago right now. He's trusting him with his most valuable possession, his wife, and so when he brings her, that kind of tells everyone else, okay, clearly Othello really must respect Iago if he's the one escorting Desdemona here to Cyprus. So they arrive, and then with them, Iago and Desdemona, comes Iago's wife, Emilia, and we get to know her a little bit in some of the later acts, but what we see here through Iago's conversation with her is that he's really verbally abusive, and he thinks very poorly of women. And Desdemona and him kind of get into a little verbal argument where she tries to get him to say something kind about his wife or about her or even about women in general. And Iago makes it very clear that he feels that a woman's purpose is to please her man and to have kids. That's really kind of Iago's perspective on women. And he talks very poorly about women, especially about his wife, Emilia. He is very verbally abusive toward her, and we see that a lot more as the play progresses, but he has a really low perspective of women in general, and especially of his wife. He really just views them as objects, not as people. So this is all going on, and then we see another ship come in the distance that kind of interrupts their argument, and this ship also shoots out those green fires, so we know that it is basically the good guys again. It's someone that's on their side, so everyone goes down to the docks to welcome them, and we see that it is Othello, and he has arrived safe. He's here in Cyprus now. He has heard that the Turkish army has kind of given up. They've gone home. There's not going to be a war anymore, so he's really excited about that. And so he basically takes Desdemona, and him and Cassio and everyone else leave the scene, and all that's left on the docks at this point is Iago and Rodrigo. And Iago basically begins his big plan here. So he starts telling Rodrigo that Cassio is actually in love with Desdemona and that she loves him back, that she's going to leave Othello, and if Rodrigo wants any shot at Desdemona, then he needs to start going after Cassio. So basically, just to recap, Act 2, Scene 1, the war is not going to happen anymore. There was a big storm that kind of destroyed the Turkish side, so they're heading back to Turkey. There's not going to be a war in Cyprus anymore. However, Desdemona and Othello and Iago and Cassio are all already there, so they're going to stay there for a couple of days and just live in the Cyprus area, since they came, they're already there and they traveled by ship, so it would not really be worth their time to turn around and go back, so they're just going to live here for a couple of days. There's no war coming, but we do have kind of disaster coming because Iago really wants to get back at Othello. He's convinced that Othello slept with his wife. He's convinced that Othello's a bad dude. He's really mad that Othello gave Cassio the lieutenant ranking instead of him. So his goal here now is to drive a wedge between Othello and Cassio, as well as Othello and Desdemona, in order to get what he wants out of this, which is mostly revenge, but also to get the lieutenant position. So that's basically how Act 2, Scene 1 ends, and then in Act 2, Scene 2, we just find out that Othello's throwing a big party. That's his big plan, is that he's going to throw a celebration in the town. So everyone from Cyprus is invited to come celebrate. And so then Act 2, Scene 3 picks up in the middle of this celebration. And Othello leaves with Desdemona. They're going to go off and consummate their marriage. They haven't really had the opportunity to do that yet. They haven't been together intimately yet. So Othello leaves with Desdemona just to go be with her. And then that leaves us with Iago and Cassio on the scene talking. And Cassio talks about the fact that he never really gets drunk. He doesn't like drinking. He's not a big fan of partying. But Iago really kind of peer pressures him and pushes him over the edge by getting him to drink a lot until he kind of becomes belligerent. And he uses that against Cassio, as we see throughout the entire scene, by kind of telling people that Cassio is a drunk, that he's always like this, that he's not a good soldier, that he isn't doing his job to protect Othello because he's always wasted. Like, Iago just starts spreading these rumors, and people believe him because right now Cassio is belligerently drunk, and so they just believe Iago that he's always like this all the time. So it starts to kind of cause the downfall of Cassio, where people are starting to lose their respect for him, and his reputation is really wounded in that. And Shakespeare does a lot with people's reputation in this play. It kind of is a point on how much we value our reputations, how much people rely on reputations to get their information about a person. So when we see Cassio's reputation start to falter, people's trust in him starts to falter as well, and it really brings about his downfall without Iago having to do any kind of physical violence to hurt him. He's able to hurt him just through manipulation and through spreading rumors. So that's kind of what's going on with Iago and Cassio. And in the meantime, they talk a lot about Desdemona's beauty, and Iago kind of tries to get Cassio to admit that he is attracted to Desdemona, that he thinks she's beautiful, and that he's kind of jealous of Othello. So Iago kind of gives these leading questions so that Cassio admits this, and Iago will use that against Cassio as well in the future. Meanwhile, like I said, Iago tells all the soldiers that Cassio is a drunk, spreads these horrible rumors, and then he encourages Cassio to go to his shift as a watchman. So Cassio leaves, Iago is spreading these rumors, and then all of a sudden Cassio and Rodrigo run in, and we find out that Cassio was actually trying to kill Rodrigo because he kind of hinted at the fact that Cassio might be having feelings for Desdemona, which is a seed that Iago planted in Rodrigo's head, and because Rodrigo is so in love with Desdemona, he's now kind of trying out for Cassio. He's got it out for him, wants to hurt him. He was drunk too, so we have these two drunk men fighting, and they come fighting into the town square, and then in the midst of this kind of scuffle, Montano gets stabbed and really hurt as well because of Cassio, which kind of snaps Cassio out of it. But all the commotion and all the noise woke up Othello, and so he comes in. He demands to know what happened, who started this. And Iago kind of feigns innocence. He's like, oh, I don't want to get my friend in trouble, so I'm just going to tell you that, Cassio got a little bit drunk, but it's fine. He's a good dude, da-da-da. So we see Iago being really kind of shady and backhanded here. And then Othello's like, oh, I know you love Cassio, now you're just trying to protect your friend, but if he started this fight, he needs to be punished, so he's not going to work for me right now. I'm going to kind of punish him, and basically he kind of puts him in a timeout where he says he can't work as his soldier for a while in order to learn his lesson. So Iago is thrilled, obviously. This is exactly what his plan was, and Cassio is devastated. So once the smoke kind of settles and Othello goes back with Desdemona, and leaves everyone kind of to be, Cassio kind of confides in Iago and says, I'm so hurt that my reputation is hurt. I hate that this happened. I need your advice. How should I get back on Othello's good side? And so at that point, Iago recommends that Cassio get close to Desdemona since she's so close to Othello, And he's like, hey, if you get really close to Othello's wife, then she'll put in a good word for you, and that might be your ticket back onto Othello's good side. And we know that his whole plan in doing this is basically to get Othello to suspect that Cassio and Desdemona are having an affair, thus kind of creating a wedge between him and the two people closest to him in the world. So that's kind of Iago's big plan here, is he tells Cassio to go get close to Desdemona, confide in her, try to get her to tell Othello good things about him so he could get back on Othello's good side, so that he won't have to suffer any punishment or any more kind of wounds to his reputation because of his drunken behavior that night at the town. So that's Iago's whole plan here, and Cassio believes him. He thanks Iago for being so trustworthy, and he decides that the next day he is going to kind of try to get close to Desdemona, to make up for this, to make up for wounding Montano and Rodrigo, and to make up for kind of how foolishly he was acting when he was drunk. And Iago is thrilled because right now he has successfully gotten Othello to be angry at Cassio. He's gotten Othello to kind of expel Cassio for a while, and so that kind of relationship is already starting to be broken. He's gotten all of the soldiers and all the townspeople in Cyprus to think that Cassio is a drunk and an unreliable person, and he's gotten Rodrigo to think that Cassio is now a threat to the possibility of him ever being with Desdemona. So he's kind of just gotten everybody against Cassio, which is his big plan. That's part of his whole goal here, is to kind of get Cassio to be socially exiled so that he can take the position of lieutenant. But he also wants to hurt Othello. So now he's kind of working at kind of create a division between Othello and Desdemona. So that's basically what's going on right now. Iago is just plotting, he's scheming. We hear in a lot of his soliloquies kind of what his big plan is. Shakespeare uses Iago's ego and his constant use of soliloquies and speeches to help us better understand his plan, to help us better understand his drive for vengeance, to help us understand how manipulative he is. And then pay attention as you continue reading to the way that Shakespeare uses people's fear of their reputation being harmed, the way he uses people's pride to kind of draw a wedge between these people based on only rumors and manipulation, without Iago really having to do anything much himself. All he does is kind of whisper stuff in people's ears and start these speculations, and then from there everything kind of hits the fan on its own, and he can kind of step back from it, and it's hard to pinpoint the blame on him. So that's kind of Iago's plan. He is a mastermind when it comes to manipulation. He is one of the most notorious Shakespearean villains, just because he gets everyone to kind of go crazy purely based on spreading rumors and manipulation, and he doesn't actually show that much violence. So that's a little bit about it. If you have any more questions on the events of Act 2, Scenes 1 through 3, you can shoot me an email, or you can use any of the resources posted in Classroom to learn more about those specific acts. Otherwise, yeah, that was just meant to be a summary to kind of catch you up if you have finished reading Acts 1 and 2 so that you are on the same page, you know what's going on. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful long weekend.